Hello, it was yesterday on the 10th of October 2021 that I finished Queen of Sorcery by, if it would load, by David Eddings. It is the second book of the Bulgarian, and it was really fun. In general, yesterday was quite a day listening to that book. I guess to start off, not even with spoilers or non-spoilers, just in general, this is a great audiobook form to listen to because I don't know how to say his name, it's like Cameron Burrell, something like that. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. He's really, 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 really good at voice acting. Like, he goes beyond putting emotion in the characters, and he does accents for everyone. Like, it's like a different world kind of accent. You can tell it's like high fantasy kind of feeling, right? So he's really good at that, and highly recommend. And he makes Mr. Wolf sound super, super grumpy, and it makes me like Mr. Wolf even more, but it's great. So, just saying, the audiobook's really good. Highly recommend. Now to actually get into it, we're going to start with non-spoilers. The reason this paper's crumpled is because this is the second time I'm recording this. The first time the file got corrupted, so we're doing it again. But yeah, so just jumping in non-spoilers. Something that I've been talking about with a bunch of other people who have read this series, particularly when they're younger, since this is usually like a series that high schoolers will find randomly for some reason. My aunt read it when she was a kid, so it's an old series, and something most people will say is that it doesn't reinvent the genre of fantasy, and it doesn't. I don't think it needs to, though. I guess there's this expectation now that books, especially in like fantasy, need to do something new and unique in order to reach some quota that readers have, and I don't think I really agree with that, and I don't think this book needs to have something new or unique about it. In fact, one of my favorite things about this book is the nostalgia of the repetition, right? To me personally, I'm sure everyone would disagree, but this book feels like if you took Princess Bride and Neverending Story and smashed it together. It's that kind of nostalgia, so I love it. It's going through the whole book, it's like, it has that feeling of like prophecy and destiny and that like kind of cliche fairy tale story, but at the same time it's not that predictable. It has comedy, but also in this book particularly it like dug deeper into like the seriousness, so it has all that, but it also it like tugs your like childhood strings. So for me, listening to this like makes me feel like a kid again, so that's why I've been loving this series. One reason. The other big main reason is because the easiest way to get to my heart in a book is to have lovable characters, and I love Aunt Pole and Mr. Wolf so much. So much. So I love them. Yay. Alright. So yeah, I don't think this book needs to reinvent anything. What it does to kind of circumvent that, and I think what David A. does successfully, is keep a lot of mystery. Has a bunch of ongoing questions in the reader's mind. He doesn't explain a lot of what happens. He gives us little tiny tidbits to feed our curiosity, and then he causes more questions. So I ended this book with more questions than I started with, even though I learned a lot in this book. So he's keeping that going, and that's part of what's keeping the book from being too repetitious or too I've seen this before, is he has constant questions going on that you don't know the answers to for the most part until you see it, or he tells you. So it's coming. There's the nostalgia, which I already explained, the lovable characters, which I also already explained, and while there are parts that the plot is predictable, something I said in my other recording is that it's hard to write in certain contexts. So if you're like in a caravan group going down a road traveling for like a month, you can have, and you do that multiple chapters, like reach a city and then you do it again, reach a city and then you do it again. Those parts can get repetitious because, you know, the main plot idea that's going to come to mind is, oh no, we need to avoid this guard. This like guard post or something like that, or we need to bribe this group. There's definitely been some repeats there with like the conflicts while they're traveling on the road, and that's going to happen in some books. But even though scenes and plot ideas like that repeat, he has other plot ideas that are so just unpredictable and sudden that they kind of overpower these, and you kind of just, these kind of melt into an overall idea. So like, I couldn't tell you much about specific scenes when they're traveling on the roads and stuff, but it all melds into like one picture, which works as like a big plot idea. I don't know if that makes sense. I said it a lot better in my other recording, I promise. But the general idea there is that even though there's like certain like scenes and ideas that repeat, it's not a predictable series. You can't predict the plots that are coming forward. It just happens sometimes. Okay. Again, I'm not going to shut up about these two. I love Aunt Paul and Mr. Wolf because in this book, I think with the majority of characters, but especially those two, they dig a lot deeper. There's more complexity in the characters, and with their relationship to Garion. So, Aunt Paul is still, wait, I shouldn't say that yet. Spoilers. I'm trying to avoid spoilers. Still in the non-spoiler section. In general, though, like Aunt Paul and Mr. Wolf, they have a lot more being revealed about them, but at the same time, they're also becoming more relatable to the character, and this is a first-person novel, so Garion's perspective of them is changing as they change, and they're not changing that much. They are kind of set in their ways, but both of them are growing deeper as Garion is learning more about them personally, so having his relationships with those two and the other characters, but mainly those two, is like just giving so much depth to them. So that's something I really like about this book, is that there's more interactions between the characters, and we're still meeting a lot of characters, which that makes it a little hard to keep track of, but with the characters we've stuck with for most of this time, all of those really dug deeper into that. However, on the other hand, this book also separated the characters a little bit. Sometimes a character would disappear for a few chapters and then come back, and that gives like a lot of flexibility, so we're not like always seeing the same character over and over again, you know. It, like, they leave and then you like are happy when they come back because you miss them. I miss that character so much, and some characters fell a little bit more in the background, but I'm sure they come back. Basically, they recycle. You're not seeing anyone too much or having one character dominate the page. He's moving them around, so that way you get a lot of equal spread. I will say that I am definitely still struggling with names, especially with places and cities and countries and races. I am going to struggle to remember those. I was talking about last book how I could not tell you any of the places, and I still couldn't, and I listened to it last night. Like, it's been less than 24 hours since I read like a massive scene about the city in the swamp, and I already can't tell you the city in the swamp. So that is a struggle. I can't even remember a lot of the people in the main group. Like, I can tell you Dernick, I can tell you Aunt Pole, I can tell you Mr. Wolf, Silk, and the other one, the guy with the red beard, and I don't know his name. And then beyond that, I can say Mandorlalen. But yeah, beyond that, I can't tell you the character names. So that is something I struggle with. There's just so much going on, name-wise. There's so many places, there's so many cities. That we're constantly being introduced with new ones before we've adapted to the previous ones. And so I think just the sheer amount the author has going is hard to keep track of. To be fair, I couldn't tell you the names of all the places in Lord of the Rings, and I've read Lord of the Rings multiple times, so it might be a me thing and not, you know, a people thing, but it's just a thought I've had, is every single time I read these books, I can't keep track of all the names to things. So there is that. And honestly, I do need to go back and reread the prologue of the first book. The prophecy prologue. Alright, so I did want to take note of that. That's probably like the biggest criticism, really. There's a little bit of repetition, but not predictable, and that. Those are like the two big criticisms, I guess, I have. But they're not even that important, really. Again, I'm gonna keep talking about this. I love the characters a lot, and especially I was talking about how their relationships are growing, since they're like cycling on the page and stuff, and we're delving deeper. Something that comes with digging into the relationships more is more of like the comedy aspect with them arguing, but in a comedic way, or like friendly arguing. And then we've also seen some like serious arguments or serious discussions where there's a lot more undertone and just emotions going on. Like, Garion is starting to like reach a point with these other people that he can like analyze them, maybe wrongly, but you know, he thinks he understands them. He has more conversations and is getting more fluent in talking to people. So that also allows him to have like more discussions and words are hard. Get their opinions on things and talk about more serious things. Like, he's being treated like a kid less because he's not as much of a kid, and so he's getting invited into that like more adult aspect as they're going on this journey. Whoop. All right. I kind of touched this already, but just to say it again, some of the plot shocks are just really sudden. Like, I tried to see like possible plots coming up, but this is a book where I just let it go. Like, I just listen to it without thinking about what's going to come next, which I kind of like that I'm doing that. It's a lot more entertaining that way. So I might actually like try to do that more often. But this book definitely, this one in particular, but the last book did it a little bit too, had very sudden like plot reveal or plot like a conflict that came out of nowhere. I will delve deeper into that in the spoiler section because yesterday was a thing. And then that's the majority of like my non-spoilers. It's characters delve deeper. I'm still feeling nostalgic. I'm still liking the book a lot. Like, the series is satisfying to listen to. It's just satisfying and it's fun. Again, it's very comedic a lot of the time, as I kind of said, but this time he got into the serious things. So again, I won't go into it in spoilers. My first recording was better. On that note, spoilers, yay. Just going in order of what I wrote here, which I all crossed out so it's hard to even read. And Paul and Mr. Wolf have powers now. I mean, they had powers before, but Garion is like starting to see them using his powers. Like, this is when Garion is first acknowledging they are sorcerers. Like, sorcerers exist in the first place, because he didn't believe in that for the majority of the last book. He did at the end, it's true, But in this book, he's starting to sense the expanse of their power, like just how much they have. Like the first time that Garion sees Mr. Wolf become a wolf and Aunt Paul become an owl. I mean, he didn't see them become those things, but he saw them as a wolf and an owl talking to each other like they're regular humans. And Garion's reaction to that, like, Garion realizing, like, hey, these guys can do things, they have knowledge and wisdom, and they're sorcerers. It's his reaction to those things is really entertaining, and also shows his development as he begins to, like, accept that and, like, take it in more and more. And then it's also sad, like, that scene is also satisfying in that we get to see some of the abilities that those two have, because it's so vast and, like, mysterious to us as the reader, because it's not explained per se. All we know is the will and the word. Currently it's kind of Gandalf-y, where we don't know what the limits of Gandalf's magic are. But seeing some of their, like, capabilities is very, very fun. So every time there's, like, a new reveal, we're, like, learning more about the characters, and we get to see Garion's reaction to the reveal. And so it's, like, 2 blocks of what's going on, and I love both of them. So, in general, we're seeing them use more and more and more things, especially at the end of the book where, like, Aunt Paul was just like, I'm just gonna grow randomly. Like, she didn't even do anything for the growth. She just decided that she was gonna become a giant. She just became a giant, 'cause why not? But the other one that I talked about in my other recording that I, like, stuck out to me, there's this scene in Battleground by Jim Butcher, which no one here's gonna know, but that's fine. There's a scene in Battleground by Jim Butcher that Titania summons, like, a literal waterfall out of the sky, like, not rain, not a downpour, like a waterfall over, like, an 8-block area of the city. Just sudden waterfall, can't even breathe in it, just insane amount of water, like, falling out of the sky. And Aunt Paul did that in this book. When the mud people came out of the ground in the forest with the dryads, she just, like, summoned a wall of water out of the sky and just soaked everyone, and it got rid of the mud people. But there's that moment where Mr. Wolf is like, Paul, I think that's enough rain. He's such a grumpy old man. But A, the power, and B, there's that, like, sass argument comedy as a result of the power. I love those two characters because they're so, because they're, like, father and daughter, they, like, their relationship creates, like, the most entertaining conversations or conflicts or whatever the word is, interactions between them. So I love every time that they have an argument and Mr. Wolf is, like, so tired or annoyed or is just like, I'm not gonna win this argument, and he's like, okay, Paul, whatever you say, or whatever. It's kind of funny. And then there's the times where he's like, no, I am the father, we're gonna do what I say. And just having those interactions between them is really funny. And the author does it in a way that's funny. There's definitely a way to write it where it wouldn't be funny, but he definitely does it really good, and I love them so much because of it. Seriously. And also, in general, I love, like, sly, mysterious characters, and both of them, again, are very mysterious because we don't know their powers, we don't know much of their backgrounds because they're thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. We're not going to learn that much about their backgrounds, but they'll bring up these, like, random backgrounds and stories, especially Mr. Wolf, who's, like, the storyteller. Like, they'll walk into a forest, he's like, oh, I've visited here before, and we're like, there's so many layers to what they have done in their lives. Like, one of them, like, ended an empire by accident. Like, where's the context behind that story? You know, there's all these random facts that come out, and I want to gather them in all together, but at the same time, having the unknown parts and having them be revealed is more fun than having all the information. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my take. I have another specific scene to talk about. When they're in the Dryad Forest, all the Dryads appear, capture Garion, ask if they want to kill Garion, have this entire conversation about murdering Garion, which is very funny, because he's just there with like 30 people talking about wanting to kill him, but you know, totally normal, right? But they get back to camp and the Dryads are like, oh, it's Mr. Wolf! And I can't do like the voice that the voice actor did for that, but they're like, oh, it's Mr. Wolf, and it turns out that Mr. Wolf is like some like ominous story trader person in the Dryad Kingdom. He's gone there before, and what he does is he always like he exchanges stories for like money and support, or just like their like adorableness, I guess, because they're like all kids even though they're like hundreds of years old. It's weird, Dryads. But it's just like the entire time he's like revealing this like he's like giving them candy and stuff, because he's like the mysterious like old man who always has candy and is like giving things out. I don't know how to describe that character. It's like Dumbledore meets Gandalf meets insert other character here. All in one person. But he's nice. He's like kind and giving is the other factor to go into there. So anyway, anytime he has one of those weird moments where he like shows he has some background with someone or like some group, and he's like using his sorcery to like do some random thing, it's really funny. And when, again, going back to the funny conflicts, when that happened, the entire time Aunt Paul was like, ugh, disgusting old man, about her father. So it's those moments where we learn something, and then we also get the interaction as well. You'll notice that everything the author does, he has multiple things to be happy about in one scene. Like there's all these things he's juggling at once. I don't know if that makes sense, but a lot of this recording I've been talking about the author doing two things at the same time. He does that a lot, and I think that's part of what keeps all the scenes alive, even though some of them can be just them walking down a road. I also love, just side comment, this doesn't have to do with anything, but I love the accent that Aunt Paul has on her hand language. Because like every time she uses her hand language, it's like, that is a very weird ancient accent. Where'd you learn? And it's like, I learned a long time ago. Little did they know she learned like 5,000 years ago, but you know, I don't know why. It's those tiny facts, those stick in my brain. So, yes. Going back to Aunt Paul and Mr. Wolf having just massive swaths of power. Part of what comes with the power is like learning how to use the power and wisdom. Mr. Wolf especially has wisdom. He has some like philosophical ideas. Most of those ideas were in book 1. There weren't as many in book 2. Especially since we saw him less, since he was gone for a bunch of chapters. But there's that wisdom, and what's going to come with that wisdom in the next book that I'm really excited for is teaching Garion, or in this case, Bulgarian, how to use his powers. Since that scene where it is revealed that Garion's real name is Bulgarian. Oh my god, yes. Excited. Yay. And Bulgarian just, like, found his power. So I guess, like, a quick glimpse of the scene. Torak, or whatever his other name is, he has, like, 3 names and 3 identities. Anyway, I'm just gonna call him Torak. The enemy from the very first scene with Garion. The very first scene with Garion when he's, like, drowning. I guess it's not the first scene, but the scene where Garion's drowning in the first book, he, like, sees his, like, nemesis, like, evil enemy, and he knows from the very beginning that they're gonna face off one day. And then in this book, we, like, see the face-off where they're, like, in a meadow, and he's, like, capturing Aunt Paul, and Aunt Paul can't do anything, because if Aunt Paul did anything, you'd kill Garion. It was this massive conflict, and there's the prophecy has it so that Aunt Paul is in a kind of horrible situation. We're just gonna put it in those words. So, rest in peace on that part, but they're talking about like fulfilling the prophecy and how even though she represents a mother figure for Bulgarian, same person, he represents like a sort of like father figure, which is a very disturbing image when you really think about it. He's kind of not wrong, but again, it's disturbing because he is like not a good guy. Put that bluntly. So that entire conversation is happening, and Darian has this moment of just rage. Like, his emotions just get the best of him. He just wants to beat this guy because they're like mortal enemies, and he knows it. And then that voice in Darian's head is like crystal clear, not subtle, not like indirect. The voice just comes in as like, not that way. I love the like calm wisdom that character has. I just want to say that. We don't know his name, so I'm just call him the id. So if I say the id, I'm talking about the voice in Darian's head. The id is like, not that way. Use the will and the word. One day we're going to learn like the significance of the will and the word, but all we know now is that will powers sorcery, and the word is the word you say, which is pretty typical in any magic if you ask me. But, you know, I'm sure there's more to it than that, especially given the god and the religion in the context of this world. But use the will and the word, and Darian, with the mark on his palm from the very beginning of the book that he always was like, I don't know, it's just always been there, I guess it's a birthmark. That mark on his palm like glows blue, and he just slaps Torek, and he says burn, and Torek just burns to death. It's great. Anyway, so that entire bit where Darian is like finding out he is a sorcerer, he has sorcerer's powers even though he's been denying it all this time, is very intense, especially when he's like that moment where he's about to stop the burning with his will, and then Aunt Paul pushes him by saying that's the same person who killed his parents. Like, she really pushed him across that line to the first time he like committed murder, and it's such an intense moment. Like, what I was saying in my other recording is that out of all the scenes that he could have discovered his magic, the author chose a very strong standout scene where he discovered his magic right at the moment where he was with his like mortal enemy and he could not hold himself back. So he went all out. It was like a very harsh scene for Garen to have discovered his magic, and that's why he has like a moral dilemma for the rest of the book, is that he hates his sorcery because his first interaction with his sorcery was to murder this guy, and he doesn't like the idea of that, even though he grew up like fighting things and for some unknown reason being good at it. I don't know why. I don't think it's because of some prophecy. We actually don't technically know that's because of the prophecy, but I'm like 90% sure it's because of the prophecy, so we'll get there. But anyway, it's that scene where he discovers his magic is just so pivotal, and especially with the moral dilemma he has later, which leads to two more ideas. One, every time Aunt Paul is like subtly pushing Darian to accept the fact that he's Bulgarian, because he is denying it. He doesn't believe in his sorcery. He hates that he has sorcery, and he thinks of himself as a monster. But in order to get that out of his system, he calls Aunt Paul a monster, which is another heart-wrenching moment where the book took like had all the happy tones and then got super serious. Well, we'll get back to this bit, but ignoring this bit, happy tones, this bit, and it got super serious with that argument between Aunt Paul and Bulgarian, because he was not having it, between like her pushing him towards like calling himself Bulgarian and her going into his head with the sorcery and calling him Bulgarian and like telling him to like embrace the sorcery and that stuff. Just all of those things coalesced, and he like broke out, and he like again, called her a monster and, like, talked about, like, how she just enjoys watching, like, the analogy, like, the flicker of flame of, like, people's lives that just, like, fade out and go away. And then she breaks out and she reveals that, like, how much she's lost and, like, how much, like, disaster has happened in the last, like, 1,000 years of her life just because she's been taking care of him and trying to fulfill the prophecy. And it's both sides, like, we can kind of understand both sides in this argument, because Garion hates himself, but he doesn't have a way to take it out, and so his teenage rage gets pointed at his, like, mother figure, Aunt Paul, and Aunt Paul has the mother figure kind of response where it's like, you can't say this to me. And she's also endured a lot. She's freaking old. Anyone who's freaking old has a lot that they've taken in. There's a quote from Peace Talks that's like, never fight an old man. They've been there before. It's a really good quote. And that's kind of what Aunt Paul is there. Like, she's been there before. So she kind of releases out everything she's done. She leaves. Garion feels guilty as hell, but he still hates that he has his sorcery, and just all of that. There's so much depth with Garion discovering his power. So that is the first big bit of Garion's power and, like, the significance of Aunt Paul. And the second thing that I'm excited for the next book is that they're gonna have to teach Garion how to use his power. Excited. So hopefully Mr. Wolf is gonna be, like, the main teacher. It's possible that Mr. Wolf will send Garion to his master, which would be very interesting. We don't know anything about him, really. We know, like, this much about his master, so it would be very interesting. But Garion is gonna have to, like, learn to use his power, because the amount of power he has is so immense, even Aunt Paul and Mr. Wolf can't comprehend it, and we obviously can't comprehend it because we don't understand Mr. Wolf and Aunt Paul's perspective on how much sorcery they can do, because we don't know how much they can do because of mystery. So we just know it's an F-ton. Is it, like, god levels? Maybe. I'm pretty sure the prophecy has something to do with him slaying a god, so I would not be surprised. I'm not actually pretty sure that. Again, I need to re-listen to the prophecy again in the prologue. We'll get there, but just, I'm very excited for that. Yay, that covers that. This one's really quick, and I've already mentioned it. I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself a lot here, but there's been a lot more arguments between the characters, especially Paul and Aunt Wolf, just because this is probably the most proximity those two characters have had in, like, thousands of years. We know that Mr. Wolf, like, visited multiple times when Garion was a kid, which is also really funny, but they're readapting to, like, being together all the time. So again, love the arguments. They're really funny. Yay. Another quick comment is that a lot of the foreshadows from the first book and earlier in this book have been fulfilled. Definitely not all of them. There's so many foreshadows. There's a lot of them, and they're all really hidden and subtle, and I think that would be something that makes these books really rereadable, is the amount of, like, foreshadows. I feel like it'd be very satisfying to come back to the first book knowing all the mysteries and things, and being able to re-experience and see all those hidden aspects. That's something I did with Dresden. Dresden's a lot more subtle about it, but rereading the Dresden Files, there's, like, all these, like, very subtle hints really early on that hints to later books. There's definitely, like, there's, like, 3 scenes in book 1 that come up in book 15. So it's just that level, that preparedness that authors have. It's really fun, and I love when they do that. So that is something happening in this series that makes me love them. 1 second. This is killing my throat. Okay. I'm not gonna get that deep into this because this whole scene is a mess, okay? That's all we need to say. But everything that has to do with Sal Misra, nuh-uh. Nope. I'm out. Bye. Samizra was freaking creepy, okay? And I feel really bad for my roommate because I was making sounds all last night. Like, sounds of panic for Garion because Samizra was a creep. And she's very disturbing. That's all we need to say about that entire series of scenes. Creepy as all hell. I was really, really concerned for a while. I thought that something, if you know what scene I'm talking about, you know what thing I was worried about, thing was gonna happen to Garion, and the entire time I was just like, no, save the boy, get him out of here. And the only thing that kept me from really freaking out was the id talking in Garion's mind, because he calms down Garion, which I think is meant to also calm down the reader, because it's like the voice of like reason that's like, everything will be fine in this situation and it's all normal. And we're just here like, dude, this woman's gonna do something, man. She's gonna do something. And something kind of sort of happened, but not to that level, just like small level. We don't even know if Garion remembers, but we remember. It's a mess. Like, just the fact alone that he was drugged was bad. The fact alone that he got chloroformed was bad. I don't think chloroform exists in this world, but it's some equivalent, whatever. But then it went further. It went way further than I expected this book to go, especially in this book. This book, in my mind, is like a book that kids could read for the most part. This entire scene, it went past that for me. I was like, wait a second, this is a little bit older than I thought it was. So I was really concerned. And the fact that one of the first things that Aunt Paul asked afterward was like, did she do anything? Go Aunt Paul for being very concerned about that, because she said that was the thing she was most concerned about. That's the thing I was most concerned about. I relate, Aunt Paul. I relate. I was very concerned about that. I will say we also did get an explanation from that, though. Apparently something really, really bad could happen if Bulgarian explored is the word that Aunt Paula said. I love how roundabout she is about that discussion, but that's interesting. It's there. But everything with Samizra was an utter mess and very concerning, and I was panicking most of the time. And then when the god got summoned, I was just like, what in the hell? She just summoned the god. And then it turned out that it wasn't really that big a deal because she's fake. But that was kind of a little bit lame, just a little bit lame, but we also got to see a god, so, you know, that's cool. It kind of balanced out. But everything with her was a terrifying mess. It's like maybe the biggest thing that stood out to me in the book was just how panicked I was in that section, because at the very beginning it started with him getting kidnapped, which is not a good sign. And then it went down a slope, man. It went down a slope fast. It didn't concern. So if there's more things like that in the books in the future, the books are gonna keep me. I'm not gonna get bored of the books if they're gonna keep doing things like that. It was not boring, it was hectic. And along that note, with the craziness that was this, and along the note of Bulgara's power, or Aunt Paul's power, because I can't pronounce Bulgara. I can never say it. So, Aunt Paul. The very end, this is one of my question marks. At the very end, which all of the Samizra stuff kind of distracted from with the amount of stuff going on here, there's a volcano erupting. Like, could we just take a minute and go back to the fact that there's a volcano erupting right in the city? It gets mentioned, and it's part of what begins Garion's escape, and then all of a sudden we, like, forget about it until the end where all these people are, like, jumping into the poisonous river to get away from, like, because they're, like, panicking about, like, the sky, and it's, like, the end of the city, and they're, like, freaking out about the fact that the, like, ash is, like, covering the sun, and they're, like, jumping in the poisonous river and dying out of panic and trying to escape on boats and stuff. That's crazy. Like, this happened, like, out of nowhere. The volcano's going on. And again, it kind of gets forgotten towards the end of the book with the comedic scene at the end, which is hilarious, but again, get back to that later. There's a volcano erupting, and I love the entire time Aunt Paula is just like, oh, we'll just get out of here. It's not even that big a deal. And there's all these people, like, dying out of panic. It's so crazy. So, my big question mark about this volcano eruption is if it was caused by Aunt Paul. I don't know. Or maybe even, like, Bulgarian. Like, we know that, like, sorcery can have, like, indirect effects if it's, like, not being used properly. And if a lot of sorcery is used, there will be, like, a counteraction that will happen. And I'm wondering if maybe Aunt Paul was, like, using so much sorcery to find Garion that she caused the volcano, or if Garion was so stressed and drugged and Jesus, everything that was happening with Samizra, that happened, or if it was just a natural occurrence and the volcano happened. I want to know what is going on with the volcano at the end of the book, because that was not explained to me. It is very sudden, and there's a lot going on with it. So, volcano, that's a big one. The end of the book ended. The end of the book ended. The end of the book had, like, a kind of happy note to, like, counteract all the craziness at the end between the arguments and, like the very serious, heart-wrenching argument and Samizra and all those things. It ended. Boop, boop. It ended with the note of Silk and Mr. Wolf getting back. This is funny. Silk and Mr. Wolf getting back, and Mr. Wolf having a broken arm, and, like, the people on the ship are like, why do you have a broken arm? And Silk immediately, as soon as someone asked, Silk immediately was rolling on the floor laughing. That's always a great start to a scene, is if there's a character rolling on the floor laughing, literally. Especially a character like Silk. Like, he would giggle, but he's, like, laughing. So, it's a great sign, and there's, like, all this suspense built up. It's, like, dragged out quite a ways. So there's a lot of suspense built up in finding out what stupid thing happened to Mr. Wolf to break his arm. And, like, because of the interactions between Aunt Paul and Mr. Wolf as father and daughter, she, like, needles him to, like, make it worse. She's like, did you get in a fight? She knows the answer, but, like, she's like, did you get in a fight? And he has this really grumpy, angry, no, I didn't get in a fight, Bulgara. And it's like, he's so grumpy. This another shout out to the voice actor for this book. It's so good. He got just how grumpy and angry he was at the end of that book, and just done with it. But it gets super dragged out as she keeps needling him, and at the very end he's like, a tree fell on me, and we don't even know the context behind that, and not reading the book, it doesn't sound funny, but when you're listening to it, it's hilarious. But he's so angry about a tree falling on him and breaking his arm. It's really funny. But again, that's another example of the characters' interactions giving a different context to a scene, because with Aunt Paul needling him and him being the grumpy old man that he is, I love him. And Silk being Silk. Silk is Silk. We don't need any explanation behind that character. He is just himself. And that is all we need to know. Also, Durnick the Prude, I love. Every time Silk is, like, also needling Durnick, is really funny. And every time Aunt Paul is like, leave him alone. Ship it. Yes. I love Dernick. He's so lovable. There's not much to say about him, and that's kind of what's sad. He kind of falls to the background most of the time, but he is a lovable character, and he's just such a good man. I think that's part of being a Sindar. That's, like, the one race I can remember, Sindars. Between, like, him and Garion being Sindars and everyone else being everyone else, it's just, like, gotta appreciate the Sindars. I think I would be a Sindar if I were in this world. It's very relatable. So, I love Dernick. I want to see Dernick more. I kind of want something to happen with Dernick. I want him to develop. He is growing. He's definitely developing. He's adapting to this because, you know, he was just a smithy before all this. But in this, like, adventure world, he's starting to, like, take up his new personality and use, like, his skills to, like, help the group. So he smiths some fish hooks and they made some fish. You know, just those tiny moments like that. Really good. And we was fighting the Mudmen. I was worried for a bit that he was going to get hurt when he was fighting the Mudmen. Also, I love, every time Aunt Paul is upset about something she did, she, like, scolds someone else to distract from it. That happened during that scene because Aunt Paul is, like, hugs Dernick because she was worried that something happened to Dernick. And then afterward, like, as soon as she realized what she was doing, she just started, like, yelling and scolding Dernick to distract from the fact that she hugged him. She's such a crush. It's kind of adorable because she's like 5,000 years old and she blushes at the tiniest things. I love it. It's another thing I love about her. She's great. There's so many opposites between the characters, but they all puzzle together well. It's so good. Again, fun, lovable characters. It's one of the quickest ways to my heart. That is the vast majority of what I have to say. I had one more scene to talk about. Oh, yes, one more scene. We're going to put a solid question mark on whether or not Aunt Paul has, like, I'm sorry to use a Dresden term again. I've used id, and now I'm about to use intellectus, but I don't really know another word for intellectus other than omniscient, but I don't think she's omniscient. So, I wonder if Aunt Paul is, like, intellectus, because there's this scene, which is another dark, serious scene. The end of this book really got down there, man. There's another dark, serious scene where the guy who has the bear soul, that I can never say his name, even though I know it has, like, a deep-sounding name. God. Urgh. Not Keldar. God. Heldor, Pilar. No, not the gods. Those are helpful. Hold on. Don't need to dress. It is Polgera. Is Polgera. Got it. And Belgarath. I love the names. Belgarath and then Belgarian. I guess it's Belgarian, not Bulgarian. The name of the series is Belgarian. The Belgariad. I always pronounce it like Bulgariad. I don't know why. Okay, what's his name? Barak. Barak? Barak. Okay, so the character Barak is, like, legitimately considering stabbing himself in the stomach. And it's really sad. And it's for the same conflict in the first book, because he's so worried about his, like, bear spirit prophecy soul thing. And Aunt Paul has multiple times, like, told him, you don't have to worry about it, it's not that big a deal. Aunt Paul is a sorcerer who's basically omniscient and might as well be treated as a god with the amount of people that respect her and bow to her. And Belgarath. Their names are renowned. You say, like, oh, Bulgara, gasp, and then they, like, start bowing. And then, side note, there is that one scene where people don't believe in them, and then just instantly freaking Mr. Wolf / Belgarath just, like, grows a tree as tall as, like, the kingdom wall, and it's just like, you now have to water this tree every day. They're basically gods. That was also a scene I loved. I think that was this book. Setting that aside, though. Returning to this. She keeps telling him it's, like, not that big a deal and whatever, and he's, like, seriously contemplating, like, hurting himself, and she's trying to make him feel guilty for it, and eventually she says something that I'm gonna get to, and he's like, wait, what? And apparently she knows, even though they're, like, entire countries away, that his wife is, like, pregnant with a son. And I don't know how she knows that. Like, is she omniscient? Can she sense that? Curious? So, things like that. Again, they, like, add more mystery to that character. I want to know how she knows that. But also, I love her for being kind and revealing that to him and saving his life, for heck's sake, in that moment. But that's just another, like, side idea, is that she knew. Also, she totally accused him, too. I'm not gonna say it, but she accused him. Okay, Also, I think Silk is gonna be his own nemesis. That will be my last comment, I swear. I think Silk is gonna be his own downfall, if there's a downfall. But I think the more we, like, meet certain characters, the more we see that he's kind of tying himself up in a way. There we go. A lot to talk about there. I'm loving the books, if you haven't noticed. I am going to continue reading the books. In fact, I am going to read Magician's Gambit next, technically. Going into the conclusion here. So I actually have a story to tell here. Supposedly, it's been 2 months since I've posted any of these book review recordings. So, you may wonder, have you not read any books? I actually have read books. I've read 2.5 books, which is not a lot, to be honest, but I have been reading books. The problem is, the first one I recorded a video for, and I really didn't like how I worded it. The book I read was American Like Me by America Ferrera, and she came and talked to the school, and I got to go to her talk and see her Q&A and everything in person, which was really cool. And after that Q&A and everything, I sat down, did an 1.5-hour recording, and the way the problem was, and I kind of had this problem with this, but not in the same way, I didn't remember enough of the who told what stories in American Like Me to really say what I wanted to say. I made, like, big overarching claims about, like, themes in the book and stuff, but those also I didn't know how to word it, so it did not come out right. So I just scratched that whole video. Just know I read that book. I recommend that book. I recommend the audiobook for that book just because the authors of each section read their own section. So you get to read it how the author wants to tell it. So, just all these different people. The idea of the book is they got all these people from different backgrounds as Americans to talk about, like, how their diversity plays into their identity and, like, how they see themselves as American or how they see other Americans and such things. Like, the title American Like Me comes from the idea America Ferrera in elementary school got, like, kind of called out by a student that said, well, I'm not an American like you, or something along those lines. And America Ferrera started questioning, what does that mean? An American like me, I'm American, we're all American. What does this person in elementary school mean? So that's kind of the premise, is, like, how identities overlap and what does it mean to be American. So I did really like that book, and it really does enlighten a lot of areas. And in my video, I kind of said some of my opinions, but I don't know. I got kind of repetitious, and I can never say which author said what. I didn't know which authors had what section, and even though I had just listened to the audiobook, I didn't know how to say some of their names, even though one of them had an entire section about talking about their name. I felt really bad, so I just didn't publish it. But I read that book. And then the other book I read, it was actually a reread, was, I don't have it on me, but Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Since it was a reread, I didn't do a book review of that, and so that one also was a book I technically read but didn't do a recording for. So it's been a while, and I feel bad. That half a book I read is called White Noise. It's by Dawn DeLillo. Hold on, let me load it up. White Noise by Dawn DeLillo. This is the cover I have for it. I'm doing the audiobook at 1.5 pace because it's pretty slow without 1.5 pace. So that's why I listen to it whenever I'm walking anywhere. It just goes by faster. There's definitely a lot to take in the book, and there's a lot of preposterous bits to the book. So there's times where it goes by slowly. One last comment about this book, and then I'll stop talking about it, is that chapter 21 is literally 2 hours long. Your typical chapter is like 15 to 20 minutes long at the most. Chapter 21 was literally 2 hours long. So I got stuck on this book for a while, and that's why I didn't finish the Belgariad until last night. I would have finished it like 2 weeks ago if I didn't get stuck in this book. So that is like the half a book. I am getting close to finishing this. It says I'm at 73%, but since I've started doing 1.5 pace, it's going fast. It's funny how much of a difference that makes. So I should be finishing this book in the next 2 days, and I will be doing a review of this book because it's a novel, so it has like postmodern ideas and stuff. It could be called a classical novel, but it's new. It's not really a classical novel. It's kind of like A Thousand Splendid Suns in how it's not fiction. It's a novel. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's not going to be like this fantasy, sci-fi, mystery, historical fiction thing I've been doing. It's going back to like a more serious, like society critical book. But I will be doing a review on it when I finish it. I need to finish it for class by Wednesday anyway, so I'll definitely be finishing it today or Wednesday. That is the book I'm technically reading next, but I'm almost done with it. Right after, I get to read for fun for a little bit until we get to An Unkindness of Ghosts in class. We'll see how far I get in that book. But then we're doing Magician's Gambit, book 3 of the Belgariad. Whoop, please show. Please. Magician's Gambit. I swear it says Magician's Gambit. Okay, we're giving up. Also, but anyway, book 3, continuing the Belgariad. I was told there were 5 books. One quick glance to make sure. Apparently there's a second series, but I'm talking about the main series. The main series is 5 books. Yep. So we'll be over halfway soon. Interesting. So I am going straight to book 3 because the ending of book 2 really sucked me in. That happens a lot with these books. Beginning will be slow, and then it just And I just want to see more of Aunt Paul and Mr. Wolf. I just want to see more. I want to soak in all the content. So I swear if one of them dies, I will flip. Just saying. I will go crazy. Okay. Just needs to be said. Anyway, we're continuing the series. I don't know if I'm gonna just keep continuing the series and then move on when I finish the series, or if I'm going to do Magician's Gambit and then switch back to Crimson Campaign, because I feel bad for leaving Powder Mage for so long. I haven't been to a physical book in a while. I mean, I did Androids in a physical book, but that's a reread. So I don't know if I will finish all of the Belgariad before I come back to Powder Mage, or if I will do both at once. These books are a little bit dense. Like, they're not like this, where it's, like, hard to remember things, but it jumps... This goes back to third person, like, switching between characters. It's not, like, one main character that you're following. So in this, we're following Garion. These books were, like, switching between characters in third person. So I don't know if I could switch between those fluently. I'm a little worried about that. So I might finish the Belgariad and then get to this. If that's what I decide to do, I will be quick, I promise. I will speed through Belgariad, and we will return to Powder Mage, because I really want to finish Powder Mage. I really want to learn more about the magic in this. I really want the Marked, and... uh-oh, here we go again. And the Knacked to be super, super badass, and turn out that the sorcerers in this are lame. Would be the ideal. But I really want to see more about the Marked. They're really interesting. So, hoping to return to this series, because I really want to finish it, and I really want to get to that prequel trilogy, because, yay. I don't know if I'll do the prequel trilogy right after, that depends on the ending, but we'll get there when we get there. This will be coming relatively soon, is the overall idea. And, with Belgariad and Powder Mage done, I will return to Journeyer. It's literally been a year and a half since I started this book. It will be the biggest book I've ever read, because it's freaking huge. Even though it doesn't look huge, it's big, I promise. I'm coming back. I'm kind of missing the journey in this book, especially since we just reached Balk. Balk and The Roof of the World are like the next two chapters, and they're both shorter than all the chapters I've had so far. Because, like, the usual chapter is, like, 50 pages. These chapters are, like, more towards, like, 25. Like, pretty decent sized with the freaking tiny font. But since we just reached Balk and The Roof of the World, which are going to be, like, more city settings than, like, the town settings. And it will have Marco Polo a lot older, hopefully, as I believe. A little bit less teenagery. So, I really want to get back to this book, because we're getting towards the middle, and towards the middle is going to be, like, the bigger, faster, more plot important stuff. So, I want to return to this. And I do miss my historical fiction. It's been a while. I do like my historical fiction. So, yeah. And also, this still isn't my book, and I still need to return this to my dad. One day, I will finish it and, like, return it to my dad. Oops. So those are really the main three things I have going on. I have Belgariad, Powder Mage, and the Journeyer. Don't really have much else to add. I have about, like, 4 different series that my friends want me to get into, between Brandon Sanderson, because there's always one person who wants me to read more Sanderson. That's always going to be true, no matter what. Even if I finish the Cosmere, they're going to be like, read more Sanderson. It's going to be a thing. I also have a friend that wants me to read Rhyuria. I hope I'm saying that right. And then I have a friend that wants me to read Gideon the Ninth, which is a little bit exciting, I'll be honest. Gideon. And I also need to read myself some of The Expanse. So, a lot going on, and I don't know which I'm going to do. We will see soon, I guess. Also, if Olympian Affair gets announced, Aeronauts Windlass is going to be very upfront. So, if Olympian Affair gets announced, like, next week, I'm dropping all of these books and reading Aeronauts Windlass. There's your warning. I don't think Olympian Affair will be announced next week. There's rumors that it's coming out this spring. Rumors. I have no idea where anyone heard these rumors. I thought it was Dragon Con, but I've watched all the Dragon Con videos. I didn't see anything. We will know when it happens. So, that is all I have. Sorry for the ranting. I lied. There's one more thing, and hopefully my camera doesn't crash when I stand up again. Please, please, please. Okay, there we go. the last section I always do is like, what is the new book I've bought? I've only bought one new book. It's The Color Purple. The Color Purple. It's a musical book. So like this, I think this influenced the musical, but it's possible this was written from the musical. I don't know which way it is, but I bought it as a book because my aunt loves The Color Purple. And it was cheap. It was like $6, $5, so I went ahead and got it. Ta-da! That is it. Belgariad. I will see you all next time.